The neighbor next door. Everyone knew the house at the end of Belmont Street, tucked away in the quiet suburbs of Cincinnati, Ohio. It was a relic of another time, a sprawling Victorian with chipped paint and sagging eaves. It was the kind of place that looked like it belonged in an urban legend. But no one paid it much mind until the summer of 2022, when the story of the neighbor next door began. Sarah Caldwell moved into the neighborhood that June. A young professional in her late 20s, she was seeking a fresh start after a difficult breakup. The Belmont house next to hers was occupied by a man she rarely saw, though she occasionally noticed him sitting on the porch, a shadowy figure behind the overgrown hedges. He was unremarkable, middle-aged with a slouching posture and eyes that seemed to linger a moment too long when she waved. She quickly learned his name from other neighbors, Alan Grayson. Alan was polite but quiet, an invisible thread woven into the fabric of the community. The neighborhood children avoided his yard. Something about the way the shadows pooled under his porch steps gave the place a forbidding aura. The first red flag, one Friday evening, Sarah returned home late from a work event. Her headlights swept across Alan's property, and something caught her eye. The garage door was slightly ajar, a faint light spilling onto the driveway. She froze when she noticed a figure standing inside, silhouetted against the harsh glow. Alan. He was holding something, a length of rope, a garden tool. She couldn't tell, but his stillness unnerved her. The next morning, she resolved to let it go. Alan was just an odd man, she reasoned, harmless in his eccentricities. Yet that night, as she scrolled through her phone in bed, she heard it, a faint scraping sound coming from the adjoining wall. Her bedroom shared a side with Alan's home, and while she'd occasionally heard the muffled hum of his TV, this was different, persistent, mechanical. The missing woman. 2 weeks later, Sarah was jogging through a nearby park when she saw the posters. A young woman, blonde and smiling brightly, stared back at her. Missing, the bold letters read, last seen, June 15th, 2022. The date sent a shiver through Sarah. That was the same week she'd moved into the neighborhood. The missing woman, whose name was Rachel Myers, had disappeared just a few miles away. Sarah began to feel uneasy but brushed it off as coincidence. But the unease lingered, growing heavier each time she passed Alan's house. It didn't help that she'd seen him in the yard more frequently, always at odd hours. He was digging holes, hauling bags of soil, and muttering to himself. Once he caught her watching and waved. She waved back, her stomach nodding. A disturbing discovery. On a humid July evening, Sarah decided to walk her dog past Alan's house. She told herself it was just a way to get some fresh air, but she knew better. As she approached, her dog stopped abruptly, ears perked and tail stiff. Then she smelled it, a sickly sweet odor that clung to the back of her throat. Her dog began growling, low and steady. Alan's garage door was closed this time, but the faint glow of a motion light seeped through its edges. She hurried home, her heart pounding, the smell lingering like a bad dream. The police report. The next morning, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She called the police, explaining the strange odor and Alan's odd behavior. They were reluctant at first, but eventually agreed to send someone out. When officers arrived, Alan was cooperative, even cheerful. He allowed them to inspect the property, chatting casually about his gardening habits and his passion for DIY projects. The officers found nothing unusual, at least nothing illegal. "We'll keep an eye on him," they told Sarah, but she could see the doubt in their eyes. The breaking point. 2 weeks later, Sarah's unease reached a breaking point. The scraping noises had returned, louder this time. She recorded them on her phone, but when she played the audio for a friend, they dismissed it as pipes or rodents. Then came the night she saw him. She was locking up her patio door when she noticed movement in her yard. Alan was standing at the edge of her property, staring directly at her. He didn't move, even when she turned on the floodlight. After a moment, he simply walked away, disappearing into the shadows of his house. That was the final straw. Sarah contacted the police again, insisting they investigate further. This time, they arrived with a warrant. The basement. The search began routinely enough. Officers combed through Alan's garage and yard, finding nothing of note. But when they entered the basement, everything changed. Overpowering and nauseating. In the corner of the dimly lit room was a locked chest. Alan's demeanor shifted. His cheerful facade crumbled into silence. The chest was pried open, revealing something that made seasoned officers recoil. Personal items, jewelry, wallets, and photos, all belonging to Rachel Myers and two other women who had gone missing in the area. Alan was arrested on the spot. Further searches of his property uncovered a shallow grave in the backyard. DNA tests confirmed it was Rachel Myers. The trial, Alan Grayson's trial, captivated the nation. He confessed to the murders of 3 women, detailing how he lured them to his home under the guise of helping with odd jobs. The basement was his workshop, as he chillingly described it, where he kept trophies of his crimes. Sarah testified at the trial, her recordings of the noises in the night adding weight to the prosecution's case. Alan's calm demeanor in court was perhaps the most disturbing aspect. He described his actions with clinical detachment, as though recounting a grocery list. The aftermath, Alan was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Belmont Street tried to return to normal, but the scars lingered. Sarah moved away, unable to live next door to the house that had become synonymous with horror. Alan's house was eventually torn down, but locals say the ground feels different there, as though it's soaked in something that can't be washed away. Some even claim to hear faint scraping noises at night, carried on the wind like a ghostly echo. Pondering the story of Alan Grayson is a reminder of how the most unassuming people can hide the darkest secrets. It's a chilling thought, one that leaves you questioning how well you truly know your neighbors.